Hi folks, in this video we're going to be looking at how I paint the red areas of the armour and on the gun of this evil Sunz orc. So, without any further ado, let's cue the music. To start out with, I'll be coming in with a base coat of deep red from scale 75, and I'm going to be painting this all over the areas that I want to be red. So for this, it's the round piece of armour on his back, the little rectangle with spikes across his shoulders, his helmet, and a piece of the armour plating on the side of the gun. If you don't have deep red from scale 75, corn red is a very similar colour. And with all base coats, I would thin this down with just a little bit of water so you can get this covered nicely in about 2 or 3 even thin coats. And here's what the orc boy looks like once I've base coated all the red pieces. Don't worry if you spilt over onto anything previously painted, just come back in with your original base colour for those areas and neaten up the finish. For the first highlight, I'll be coming in with blood red from scale 75. And this is a very similar colour to Mephiston Red from Games Workshop. I'm going to be painting these armour panels in a volumetric style, which means that I'm going to focus on highlighting where the light is going to be hitting most. So for that first highlight there, I am starting to paint maybe 3/4 of the bottom part of each panel, and then I'm rinsing off my brush and going backwards and forwards over our base coat and the edge of the new layer of paint and softening out that transition of colour. To aid yourself in painting these areas volumetrically, I would recommend keeping the paint slightly thinner than you would do for a normal layer. And the most important thing with this volumetric style is to think about your highlight placement. For example, on that roundel on the back, the light is going to be coming down from the top, so it's going to hit that very top edge of that round surface, and then as it's leant slightly forward, that top area is going to be in shadow, and then as it becomes more and more visible to the sun, it's going to get brighter towards the bottom. And if you keep your paint thin and you work in a directional motion, so you pick the brush up from the miniature where the strongest concentration of light is going to be, as when you do a stroke with a brush and then pick it up off the model, the most pigment is left at the end of the stroke. And this is why you see a lot of people doing directional glazing with models, as the end of the stroke of their glaze is when they're leaving the most pigment on the model, and we can apply that to a layering technique. And it's just a trick of keeping the paint a little bit thinner and thinking about where the light is going to hit. And if you think you've covered too much area or the transition is too stark, then just rinse your brush off while it's still wet and go backwards and forwards and start to blur the line. If you are coming in with 2 or 3 colours, that first transition and each transition is going to look naturally softer. And this is why I do like the Scale 75 paint for this, because they really do have that lovely matte finish and sort of seamlessly blend with one another. It's not that you can't do it with other paints, and a lot of paints have a satin finish which gives them a much nicer pop on the table, and with this Scale 75 you do have to manually paint in a lot of that pop, but you can do it with the GW paints that I recommend or the Vallejo equivalents. And with this colour I'd recommend coming in with 2 or 3 passes. We don't want to go completely stark and make such a bright transition difference in colour, but we do want enough to make sure that we get a nice solid coverage of the thinned paint. The next highlight in the red on this model will be Antares Red from Scale 75. The Games Workshop equivalent for this paint will be Evil Sunz Scarlet. And what I am doing with this colour is I'm going to be painting the bottom third or top third, depending on the armour shape, in this colour, and then using the wet brush technique to feather out and soften the transition. I've kept this a little bit thicker than I have the other 2 stages, as this is quite a transparent paint and I really want to not have to do a million layers to get the coverage that I want. You sort of can see to the edge of my blob on my palette I have thinned with a little bit of water, so I'm not actually dipping the brush into neat paint, I am making sure that this is still wet. And with this, we are looking to define the shapes here. So I'm going along and picking out any edges, and these I'm doing in a volumetric style and zenithal. So with this, I'm looking for edges that the light's going to catch. So on the side of his gun here, I'm doing the underside of the little holes that are drilled into the side, and I'm picking out the top edges. I'm not highlighting the bottom edges with an edge highlight, as we are not painting in a reflective bounce light off the floor. I'm purely focusing on natural light where the sun would hit. When it comes to painting something like his helmet here, I will be painting the very top of this helmet, so that top third in the middle, with a rounded effect to show the transition of colour. And then picking out the edges with this colour as well, and the bottom third again on the side of this helmet. We are really looking to start to define shapes and volume with this colour. Now, the thinner that you keep this colour, the more layers you'll need to do, and the softer the transition will look. There is nothing stopping you if you think you've got too stark an edge, coming back in with your previous colour and redefining some of those shapes. And you might decide that you want this armour to be brighter or darker, and the amount of area that you cover with these colours can change on that. So if you want this to be a darker red, you might want to only cover a little bit of it with this and show this as an extreme highlight. Or if you want it to be quite bright, you can paint more of it with your mid-tone colour, your blood red or your mephiston red, and do a very little bit of highlighting on with this colour, really to show that change in transition and the tonal variety that you want to go with the red. For the final highlight on this red armour, I am coming in with an edge highlight of Mars Orange from scale 75. The exact orange that you have doesn't really matter in this. I'm just using something that's nice and vibrant to allow the red to really pop as an orangey red rather than as a pinky red. And with this, I am going around all of the uppermost edges and picking out all the rivets. And if you're feeling really confident, you can start putting in some very minute scratches and detailing into the armour, but that step is entirely optional. The key thing is to do with this is to use the edge of your brush and take your time and pick out all those raised edges. I would try to avoid doing too many of the bottom edges unless you've put in a bounce light from the floor. If you highlight a object all the way round, it looks a bit strange, especially if you focused on this zenithal lighting aspect. What it's really going to do is, if we've got that dark paint at the top and then we're doing this very bright highlight along that top edge, it's really going to allow the contrast to pop and really allow the blending and the variation of colour that we've put in our previous steps to really shine and look fantastic on the table. With the orange highlight done, the red armour on this orc is now complete. The key things to remember with this red armour is to take your time when you're doing all of these layering transitions. The more time you take and the more careful you are with your brush strokes, the better the final result will look. Remember, it's not a race to get these painted when you're doing this style, and this is to really push your painting style to make you have a boy model that you're really proud with, but you might just want to reserve this style for characters. If you like this tutorial, why not consider subscribing? It's free of charge, it helps me out, and you hit that notification bell, then you'll get further updates in your YouTube feed on videos just like this one. So, until next time, folks.